Yo, what's poppin' everybody? Sebro94 with a deck analysis on another iconic classic deck. We've already looked at a fine example of an aggressive disruption deck in Haymaker. We looked at a great example for a lock toolbox deck in Guardy Gallade. And today we're going to be looking at an excellent example for an energy acceleration / one-hit knockout style deck, an extreme deck, one of my favorite decks for many reasons. This is going to be Blaziken, or you might want to call this Ray Blaze, Blaze Ray. As you guys can see, this Blaziken looks pretty familiar. This is the original version of the Blaziken that we got from Dragon Majesty. Originally was supposed to come in Celestial Storm. The original old Blaziken with firestarter. Jason Klaczynski actually uses the EX Power Keepers reprint art version for his deck, but I decided to show you guys the original EX Ruby version here, just so you guys can see the power creep, all the differences between the original Blaziken and the one we have now. This deck is so iconic and personally dear to my heart for so many different reasons, being, to my knowledge at least, the first actual energy acceleration from the discard power deck. I don't believe we had any Pokemon that actually grabbed energies from the discard pile and you could attach it anywhere. This is the first deck where Rayquaza X not only debuted, but it actually started wreaking serious havoc. When Blaziken X got released, it got even cooler. You could run Blaziken X and do extreme snipe damage too. And it's pretty much Blaziken and Rayquaza. Who doesn't love these Pokemon? So I'm going to show you guys the deck list as I've done with the other deck analysis videos. It's from Jason Klaczynski. Once again, if you check out his articles, you can find the list and see what he has to say about the decks and other decks. It's a pretty good, interesting, reliable list. There's a lot of good stuff that I really like seeing here, a lot of interesting choices, but if they make sense in my mind, then that's a good thing. And as you guys can see, once again, a big Pokemon line, maybe not so big as the Guardy Gallade list. Solid trainer line, 25 and 15 energies, so a good number of energies as well. So we're going to start with the heart and soul of the deck, of course, the Blazikens, but before that, we got to look at the regular line for you to get there. And of course, we're going to have Torchic and Combusken for that. So he runs, obviously, 4 Torchics. He's using the EX Power Keepers one. Some interesting trivia for this Torchic is that Power Keepers is supposed to be like a reprint set, but the Torchic in the Ruby set actually just has Cinch. It just burns. You can use it with any energy. And this Torchic has Super Cinch, and you do 10, and then you flip a coin for the defending Pokemon to be burned as well. It's actually the best choice. In this era, we had plenty of Torchics to choose from, but they mostly have 40 HP, and not really the greatest attacks, of course. I'm actually not sure why he's not running the Gold Star Torchic. You can run 1 Gold Star Pokemon in your deck. I believe the ruling must be that they can evolve, so you can't use the Gold Star Torchic, even 1, and then evolve into Combusken and Blaziken. So perhaps that's why I'm not seeing it here. But if you could, running 1 Gold Star Torchic is pretty good. It has 70 HP, it has a really good first attack. But I don't think he made a mistake here. It's just I think the ruling is that Gold Star Pokemon are completely independent, so you probably can't evolve the Gold Star Torchic into Blaziken. Anyways, moving on. We have 2 Combuskens next. You got to run a bunch of these too. And he's using the EX Power Keepers version once again, but this card is originally from the original EX Ruby and Sapphire set. Like with the Torchic, there's a lot of different Blazikens to choose from in this era, but this is probably the best one. All of the other ones usually have better attacks. This one only has 1 attack, and it's not good. But they have 70 HP. There's one that does have 80 HP, but it has a 2 retreat cost, I believe from Crystal Guardians. And this one has a pretty good, useful Pokebody as well. Natural Cure. When you attach a fire energy from your hand to this Combusken, remove all special conditions. It's basically exactly the same as the Dragon Majesty reprint or the Celestial Storm reprint. I'm not sure which of this sets they decided to include that in. Has a better attack, of course. But yeah, 80 HP, only 1 retreat cost. Natural Cure is useful. When you evolve, the special conditions get removed anyway, but it's a nice body to have. You never know when you're going to need it. 1 retreat, really useful. If you want to go with the more reliable and actually decent attacks for a stage 1 that can still evolve, there's the other Combuskens, plenty of others to look into, but they have 70 HP. So 2 Combusken, We need a big line. Eras were different back then, so a 2-line for that. And then we're going to look at the start of the deck, Blaziken right here. So the Blaziken from EX Ruby and EX Ruby and Sapphire has firestarter. This is, to my knowledge, like I've said, the original energy acceleration deck that you can attach it to any Pokemon on the bench, not just yourself. I'm not sure if there were any Wizards Pokemon that could do stuff like that. I don't remember, but I believe this was the first like real energy acceleration Pokemon. With Firestarter, you can grab a Fire Energy from your discard pile, attach it to one of your bench Pokemon. And of course, since this is an old Pokemon, you can't use this effect if you're affected by special conditions. So you guys can see major differences. Only 100 HP as compared to the Blaziken that has 150 now. You can do Fire Stream. It basically does the same attack. You do damage, and then you can discard a Fire Energy attached to Blaziken. If you do, you do Spread as well. In this Pokemon's case, you do 50 base damage, and you're going to do 10 spread damage to all of your opponent's bench Pokemon. Obviously, the new one does a lot more damage, 90, and does 20 spread to everybody. So even though this is much weaker, of course, back in its era, this Blaziken, it wasn't a completely bad attacker. So if you had to attack with this Pokemon, it's actually not bad. You're doing 50, you're doing a lot of spread. If your opponent has a full bench, you're basically doing, I believe, let's see, 100 damage total. If you did, let's say, 50 to all of your opponent's bench Pokemon, 5 Pokemon, and then 50 on the active. That's a lot of good damage output there. But of course, this wasn't your main attacker. We have 3 of these guys to power up different Pokemon. And the main Pokemon is going to be Blaziken EX, eventually when it got released in EX Team Magma versus Team Aqua. This Pokemon wasn't around for a bit. The Blaziken deck, you could use that with just power up the Firestarter Blaziken itself, or power up other Pokemon like Camerupt or Rayquaza in this case, as we're going to look at. But when Blaziken EX got released, it was pretty much a no-brainer. These Pokemon were going to be combined and they could be used together. This is an EX Pokemon, so it's going to be strong. 150 HP. It's got a double weakness though, which can suck, being weak to Psychic and Water. Gardevoir was kind of popular back then too, Gardevoir EX, so it could give it some trouble. And Water wasn't actually half bad either. But this was still a top deck, super iconic deck. I was actually going to do Meta Knight for this deck analysis for an energy acceleration deck, but I thought that uses sort of more specific cards, and this is just more straightforward, more basic. So I decided to go with this one. Okay, 2 great attacks. Blaze Kick, you do 30 for 2, and then you flip a coin. If heads, it does 30 more, or actually no, 20 more. So you do 50 for 2, still pretty good. And if tails, it does 30, and then if any Pokemon is not burned. So I like these attacks where you flip a coin, and then no matter what, you do get a useful sort of effect. And no matter what, if you get the burn, it's pretty good. You're negating your opponent's powers if they have any, and if you get lucky, you do extra damage. If you get heads, you do straight 50 for 2. That's not bad for a first attack. And then the real attack you were going to use this Pokemon for was Volcanic Ash. You discard 2 Fire Energy attached to Blaziken X, and then you can do 100 damage to any Pokemon. So this is a snipe. Of course, if you did this on the active, you could apply weakness. So it's a pretty powerful attack for back then. 4 energy, you discard 2, but doing 100, that was a magical number to KO a lot of Pokemon, and it's just high damage for back then. It wasn't going to get any better for the energy cost and the discarding cost you have here. So this was pretty good. You could instantly knock out Pitchouts, which is a major support Pokemon for back then. This deck also includes it. You can knock out basically any stage 1 non-EX stage 1 Pokemon, even basic EX Pokemon too. Since they had 100 HP, they were going to get KO'd. You just did a lot of damage, and it went perfectly with Blaziken, since you discard energies and then you grab them back with the Firestarter Blaziken. The Rayquaza, Ray Eels, Inferno Fandango strategies you guys should be familiar with if you're watching my channel. Get one-hit knockouts, do major damage, discard energies, get them back. So they work great together. Ran 2 of these, good old Blaziken X, and this is basically the Blaziken engine. Both of your attacker and your energy acceleration dude evolved from the same Pokemon, Torchic, and it was going to be your main attackers for the most part. Next up, we're going to look at the other sort of backup attacker, which was the star before Blaziken X came out. And that is the original Rayquaza EX from EX Dragon. Another reason why I really love this deck, this is the original deck where Rayquaza EX sort of made its amazing debut, powerful debut, showing everybody what it's got, who's the fucking boss. Getting one-hit knockouts in the same vein as the Dragon's Exalted Rayquaza EX that I use in my decks all the time. With Dragon Burst, you discard either all fire or lightning energy, and for each energy you discarded, you do times 40. So in this case, we're going to discard fire energies. If you discard 2, you do 80. If you discard 3, you do 120. And if you just discard 4, you're basically knocking out anything. Doing 160 damage, basically just discarding 3 energies. You knocked out anything in one hit. Nothing was going to survive unless it was a fucking Wailord. Whether it was an EX Pokemon, whether it was a Stage 2 EX Pokemon, it didn't matter. With 160, you were getting the job done. Most of the time, you didn't even have to discard this many. Just discarding 3, you did 120. So that was enough to knock out regular Stage 2 Pokemon, most Stage 1 and basic Pokemon as well, even EX Pokemon. And, if you discarded 2, you did a solid 80. So pretty good. Before Blaziken X came out, this Pokemon was mostly the main attacker if you were going to use this deck with Rayquaza X and not use any other fire Pokemon. It's kind of solid having 100 HP and a double resistance to water and fighting. It can be pretty useful. But when Blaziken X came out, it was sort of the more reliable Pokemon. You would use this guy sort of as a backup dude towards the end. A lot of the lists, I believe, only ran 1. Jason runs 2 in this case for backup as a sort of surprise factor, I think. Or maybe you just need 2 of them. Even though it's not bad, 100 HP for a Pokemon that's going to give 2 prizes, you kind of didn't want to overuse this guy. So this is why it's sort of better to use this as a cleaner towards the end and use Blaziken X as the main Pokemon. More HP, the snipe can be pretty deadly, of course. So this is what the beautiful thing about this deck is, that there's actually plenty of ways to run it. You can actually focus more on Rayquaza X if you want to, and this way your deck is more consistent, but obviously you don't have as much tanking capabilities as Blaziken X. You can go the full Blaziken X route, maybe cut one of these, just run different Pokemon. It's really awesome. But that's what Rayquaza X is here for. That's where this deck basically is a true energy acceleration deck where you discard energies, get one-hit knockouts with Pokemon like Rayquaza here. Okay, the other Pokemon, these are basically your offensive Pokemon. The other Pokemon in here are mostly, pretty much, not mostly, have a supporting role. So we have a Pitchout line in here. So we're going to look at the Pidgey first. There's actually not a lot of Pidgeys as I was looking for these cards, getting the images for these cards. Even today, there's not a lot of Pidgey cards. So in that era, you basically had the Fire and Leaf Green option here. Colorless Pokemon, it can do corner. That can be kind of useful, prevent your opponent from retreating. 50 HP, fighting resistance. Or you can actually use the Delta Species Pidgey, the lightning one, and give your deck a bigger focus on the Delta Species aspect. There's some Hollow supporter cards here too. I'm going to talk about the different things you can do. But he's going with the normal Pidgey here, 2 of these. And then we have 1 Pitchout here. Like I've said, there's not a lot of options, but this one is pretty good too. Doing clutch, doing 10 defending Pokemon can retreat, so useful if you have to attack. And then the reason you run these guys is of course to run Pitchout. We have 2 Pitchout line here, 2 of them. So it might seem kind of crazy to run 2 Stage 2 lines in this deck, especially when you consider we're running 5 Stage 2 Pokemon because there's 2 Blaziken X's and 3 Blazikens. But you got to keep in mind the formats here. They were setup oriented. We had the busted original rare candy, so it's a different animal. And you really had to get out a supporting Pokemon back then that gave you an edge. If it wasn't Pidgeot, it was going to be something else like Porygon 2 or something like Delcatty. You could use that too in this deck, I suppose. Or you can just run something that blocks powers and shit. But in this case, since you're running Blaziken, you can't actually do that effectively. So Pitchout here, this is one of the strongest searches. Gives you an amazing toolbox effect. With a quick search, once during your turn, you could choose any card from your deck and put it into your hand. Pitchout actually makes a lot of sense in a deck like this because unlike the energy acceleration decks from the discard pile that maybe you guys are familiar, Malamar, Ray Ills, Bronzong. We don't actually have, we have something, we had Pokemon like Keldeo EX, Dynamax Necrozma in this case, and Floatstones before the rotation. But back then, there's actually no Pokemon like that that gives you that sort of board control and free retreat. You're going to have to use switches and war points in a deck like this and just time your moves right. With Pitchout, it's actually a way we can instantly search that switch, that war point, so it's pretty good. 100 HP, free retreat. Its stats are pretty solid considering it's so broken with this Poke Power. And once again, it does clutch. It's going to do 40 for 2, and if any Pokemon can retreat. Definitely quick search is the reason you ran this card. I'm not sure if I would run Pitchout in this deck, and maybe I would run a different Pokemon or maybe run more supporters, but Jason Klasinski is the expert, and he says you gotta run this Pokemon, so I'm gonna go with him that, yeah, you probably kind of have to run this Pokemon. Okay, so the last Pokemon is just Jirachi. I was gonna say Deoxys, but this is from EX Deoxys, major supporting Pokemon for any deck during the era with Wishing Star. Once during your turn before you attack, if Jirachi was active, you could look at the top 5 cards of your deck, choose one of them, and put it into your hand. Shuffle your deck afterwards, and your other active Pokemon. Wait, shuffle your deck afterwards. Jirachi and your other active Pokemon are now asleep. Right. So actually, we're gonna get another Jirachi too. That basically has the same effect pretty much. From I think it's gonna be from Dark Order or one set, and this one actually puts itself to sleep too. I don't remember it going to sleep, but it seems that this one goes to sleep too. You basically could grab any card from the top 5 cards of your deck. So major consistency, you could grab a Pokemon, you could grab a trainer, anything. And this basically replaced Dunsparce as your starting Pokemon. You wanted to start this, get this effect off, and get cards basically. So 2 of this Jirachi, I don't think I've missed anything. You could grab any card, yeah, from the top 5 and put it into your hand. So a pretty simple Pokemon line. You've got your energy acceleration guys, you got Pitchout for support, and Jirachi for additional consistency in the beginning. So next up, it's going to be the trainers. So we have first and foremost a 4 Celios network line here, maxing it out. This card gets you a basic Pokemon or evolution card, excluding Pokemon EX, and you put it into your hand. So you could get a Torchic with this, you could get a Blaziken. You can't get a Blaziken EX or rayquaza EX, mostly anything else. If you bring out your Pitchout, usually that's what you probably want to do with this, so you can start grabbing free cards. You know, you set up your guys pretty quickly, and then you get going basically. Pretty good card. I don't know if I would run this, but I'm not completely like super familiar with those formats. It's not like it's yesterday. Jason Klasinski did a lot of testing with these decks when he posted out these deck lists for these formats. So I'm guessing it's a good number to run a maximum line of these. You have a lot of different options though. Between the Holon engine and the classic engine, as he refers to it, of supporters, you have a lot of different ways, a lot of neat stuff you can do. I'm going to show you guys some of my ideas as well. Next up, it's going to be Rocket's Admin. This is basically the original N from back then. A very, very expensive card to get. This is the most expensive uncommon card from what I understand. It's pretty crazy, but it's basically N. I don't need to say anything else. You shuffle and draw depending on your prizes. It's pretty good, especially since this deck maybe you need a little bit of time to set up. If your opponent is playing a speedy deck, you're going to start hindering them, giving them less cards to work with. So 3 of these, and then he's running 2 TV Reporter. Now this is where the interesting stuff is going on. TV Reporter draws 3 cards, and then you can discard any card from your hand. This effect is much better compared to now. Nowadays this card is kind of weak when there's cards that let you draw straight 3. But back then you couldn't really draw 3 without any cost, and we had a few different supporters that did stuff like that. Field Blower, you drew 3 and then your opponent could draw 1, or there were other cards like I think Professor O, nothing comes to mind. No, that was in the DP era. But TV Reporter is quite good in this case because, remember, we actually need to put our fire energies in the discard pile as well. So TV Reporter draws cards, and we discard an energy too, or just any card that we don't need. So pretty good. Now I'm gonna jump ahead here, or actually, yeah, jump ahead and show you guys Holland Adventurer. He runs one of these cards too. So this guy, you have to discard a card first to play this card, and then you draw 3. But if you discard a Delta Species Pokemon, you actually draw 4. So if you want, you could actually take out the normal Pidgeys and add, let's say, Delta Species Pidgeys, and maybe run more of these and have a bigger emphasis on this card. And this way you draw more cards. But the thing is, what I think Jason thought here is that even if you add the Delta Species Pidgeys here, and the Delta Species Pitchout, maybe you don't want to discard that. That's basically 3 targets, so it's not going to be very consistent. Also, TV Reporter also lets you draw 3, so a lot of the times you probably want to draw first, hopefully see an energy, and then discard it. So that's why it's a good balance, I think, to run only one of this guy and run TV Reporter as the main card. The reason you run this guy and not just straight 3 TV Reporters is because there's a card called Holland Transceiver in here. I'm jumping ahead here, but I'm going to explain to you guys. So Holland Transceiver, this was a pretty amazing card. It's got the metal energy icon there, pretty cool. You can search your deck for a supporter that has Holland in its name, put it into your hand, or get the Holland supporter from your discard pile and put it into your hand. So it has this sort of flexibility stretcher effect as well, where you can grab something from the deck and from the discard pile. If you guys are familiar with Premier Ball, that grabbed you a level X from the deck or from the discard pile, so it's pretty good. So can you imagine if there was an item that let you grab Bridget and put it into your hand, or something like Juniper? We didn't have things like Juniper here, so don't worry, but we do have the Holland Mentor here. I'm pretty sure he's running, let's see, 2 of these guys, right. So Holland Mentor, this is the Bridget of this deck. You discard a card from your hand once again, and then you can search your deck for up to 3 basic Pokemon with 100 HP or less, put them into your hand. So this is where the Transceiver, the Holland Mentor, comes in, and the Adventurer. You run a bunch of these Holland supporters since they have good effects anyway, and with the Transceiver you actually have the flexibility to get them. So for example, Holland Transceiver can be used to search the Adventurer. So maybe you don't need to use the draw first effect of TV Reporter. You get the dude like that, and it just gives you that sort of extra consistency, searching capability. Pretty good. Holland Mentor is going to grab you your Pokemon. Obviously you want to see this pretty early, maybe turn 1 or 2, so you could set up your Pokemon, set up your Pidgeys for Pitchout, get a bunch of Torchics too. Pretty nice. And let's go back in order here. We talked about the 2 TV Reporters, 2 Holland Mentor, 1 Adventurer. Next up, it's going to be the Holland Scientist, another pretty good Holland supporter. You can grab it with a Transceiver. This guy, you discard a card from your hand once again in order to play this, and you draw as many cards as your opponent has in hand. So if you have less cards than your opponent, you draw until you have the same cards. So if your opponent had a big hand, you already discard a card with this to play it, so it's a discard outlet for your fire energy too. That's why the Holland supporters work so great in this deck. It's a good draw supporter, kind of like Lily, you could say. So pretty good. Only 1 of these, I believe. Right. Next up, I already talked about the Transceiver. 3 of this. It's pretty good. It's basically an item that grabs you supporters for free. The rare candy is pretty self-explanatory. You run 4 of these. It's busted. It's gonna get you out Pitchout, Blaziken, super fast. Turn 1. If you have this, you can actually use it. Perfect. And next up, we're gonna go through some techs, and we're actually almost finished here. I believe I covered everything. We got 2 Windstorm. This is the original Field Blower. You choose 2 in any combination of tools or stadiums, discard them. This is pretty important to run this tech. Basically kind of like when you run your Field Blower and your tool removal for Garbodor. It's kind of the same. Even though there isn't Garbodor during that time, there are some ability Pokemon that can shut you down. But more importantly, there's I think a card called Cessation Crystal, or there's basically a tool that actually blocks your abilities, or your powers in this case. If they have that attached on, you can actually use powers. So it shuts down Blaziken, shuts down Pitchout. So it's important to run this tech. Get rid of your opponents. Well, actually, no. I think it's a stadium. It's the Battle Frontier that negates powers. It's either that or Cessation Crystal. It does something like that. I don't remember, so don't quote me. I might be wrong. But I know you run this to basically help make your abilities live again if they shut them down. You get rid of something that hinders you. So it's a good tech, of course, always removing tools in stadiums. And next up, we have the switching cards. We have 2 war points in this case. Switch your opponent's Pokemon and your Pokemon too. It doesn't matter what your opponent switches into because remember, Blazikens can snipe, so you can hit whatever you want most of the time. But a lot of the times, if they actually do have to make a shitty decision to bring something active, that's where the war point comes in. Give them that disruption, force them to make a move like that. And then the one switch, solid card all around switch. I run so many sort of switching cards in my deck basically, where you do have access to float stones and Keldeo and these sort of Pokemon that give you complete board control if you have abilities. So just seeing him run a couple of these, I just don't see that being enough. I mean, I run 2 switches in my deck, either way, in addition with the float stone stuff and Keldeo. But you do need these switching cards because once you get the attack off, if they don't knock you out and you want to attack again, you're going to need a way to switch. Blaziken only gets the energies on the bench Pokemon. And then for the energies, we have 11 fire energies, so a lot of energies here to discard. And then 4 multi-energies. Multi-energy is actually crazy. There's actually 5 different prints in the EX era of this card. I have the EX Power Keepers version here, the one he's using too. But it's crazy. This card basically got reprinted, has 5 prints in the EX era. Then it got 1 print in the DP era, and I think that's it. This is in here for Rayquaza. You attach this, and it's basically going to be your lightning energy, or it can be another fire energy, since it basically acts any energy as long as you don't have any special energies on your Pokemon. So it's pretty good, and that's basically it. The deck is pretty straightforward. It's a much simpler, straightforward energy acceleration deck. Meta Knight is more of an iconic deck, I would say, and more powerful, but there's a lot of sort of era-specific cards that I need to talk about, and I think this is just a more straightforward deck to show you guys that aren't super familiar with this era. Just Blaziken, get Blaziken out, get the energies, get one-hit knockouts with Rayquaza, or just get one-hit knockouts with Blaziken, get snipe knockouts with Blaziken X. Pretty simple, pretty good. We have our support Pokemon. We're pretty consistent with the Holland Transceiver. We're grabbing any of our Holland supporters that we need. Set up the bench with Mentor, draw cards with Scientist. Maybe you want to discard and draw with Adventurer. And it's just an all-around really cool deck, really fun deck. Pretty good. So one of my favorite decks for sure, being an energy acceleration featuring Rayquaza and Blaziken. And I don't think there's much else to say. This was a top deck for its time when we only had a few EX sets around, when that was the sort of beginning of the EX era, the first half you could say. This was a top deck along with the Gardevoir, and then everybody was surprised when the Team Magma deck won the first World Championship when the Pokemon Company organized the shit. But this is a pretty good deck all around in the era if you want to try out. Jason Klasinski has it featured as some of his better decks for the era. Meta Knight is probably stronger, and there's other decks that probably are just stronger, but you can still run it. It's still pretty good. It's pretty iconic. And you can do whatever the hell you want. Run Blaziken X, run less Blaziken X, run more Rayquaza X, drop Rayquaza completely, do all sorts of shit. It's pretty good. Excellent deck. Really fun deck. So that's basically it from me. I hope you guys enjoyed this deck analysis. I hope you guys subscribe, leave a like, share this with your friends. Hopefully Blaziken right now from Dragon Majesty can do some shit, but obviously it's not as good as how the original Blaziken was back then with the competition and the better rare candy. But anyways, hope you guys enjoyed. Sabro94, what up?